that the Japanese have demonstrated their excellence in the Delhi metro. They are partners in the western stretch of the dedicated freight corridor and the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor projects. These projects, along with the high-speed train, open up a vast array of opportunities. The Japanese rely, to my mind, the Japanese truly believe that India is not merely a potential but a reality. They also comprehend that India's future is in infrastructure. The story has just begun in India with our urbanization process. While the story is ended across America, it's ended across Europe. It's nearing its completion in China. In India, it's just begun. And the next 5 decades, we'll do more infrastructure and more urbanization than what we've done in the last 500 years. India needs next generation technology to leapfrog in cutting edge technology. The Japanese companies are highly advanced. They innovate, they are perfectionists, and several companies work together in a consortium, as I said. And to my mind, the high-speed train will act as a huge social and psychological change act. It should change the mindset of Indians, particularly the Indian railways, which badly needs a change of mindset, and teach them the art of excellence, safety, punctuality, and perfection. One of the main reasons why I've been a great admirer of Japan is because no other country has suffered the kind of disasters, the kind of natural calamities which Japan has witnessed at such regular and frequent intervals. But it has demonstrated this immense ability to always bounce back, and bounce back with greater vigor and energy. There was Professor Donald Keene of Columbia University, who has taught for over 50 years of Columbia University. He, at the age of 89, decided to give up his citizenship of the United States of America and become a Japanese citizen. And he said that he will spend his last days in Japan. And to quote him, if any civilization has constantly suffered tragedies and always bounced back, it is Japan. It is because they believe in discipline, teamwork, and perfection. I want to live with these people. I want to die with these people. And it is this uniqueness which Japan brings to India through the high-speed train project, Delhi Metro, Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, which can catalyze and transform India to become a global leader in size, scale, and safety. Thank you very much, Lady.
We have about a few minutes, so I'll start with a set of 3 questions. If the questions are short and they require short answers, then we'll have a second round. Yes, please.
Shall I just speak?
There should be a...
Why not come there? See your face. No, I don't. I can't stand there and talk to it. Amitabh, one very simple question. Eventually, in case of any infrastructure development, it is a cost to the country's economy which counts. And Japanese have been here now, they are working on the connectivity, basically surface connectivity. What I would like to know is why the Japanese have not taken the step in the power sector, number 1. And number 2, if you were to compare the cost of investments, say, coming from China in the power and Japan, how would they stand?
So we'll first take the 3 questions.
Yeah. No, let me respond to this. This is an important question.
You don't know, the next 2 could be important too. Yes, please. There was somebody whose hand I saw. Yes, please.
Chakravarti, I have a Japanese project which exactly is in the same area which you said. The project is through from the Indian government. It's about the independence and how we come forward. And the Japanese are going to take exactly 1 year more to sanction the project. Now, I would like to ask you, sir, how can this be tackled? And the second issue is, sir, in the defense field, why are the Japanese not keen to invest as they are coming in other areas?
Darshana.
Mr. Khan, in the previous sessions, we discussed a little bit about the importance of developing the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. I was wondering if you could share with us Niti Aayog's plans for developing these islands, and you also mentioned smart islands. So if you could elaborate on the concept, it's something that has appeared in the joint statement in the last 2 years. So what really is this initiative, and is there a role for Japan to play in this?
Yeah, very major. So, set of very good questions.
I told you.
Yeah. So, one is, that there's a difference in approach. Indians believe in doing L1 all the time, lowest cost. And the Japanese believe in life cycle cost of technology. And every time you do L1, you'll end up with a disaster. Whereas they believe in perfection. So for them, it's very important that if you evaluate technology through the life cycle. And when we say Japanese are more, companies can be more expensive, it's because we don't do evaluation on a life cycle cost. And actually, if you were to compare a Chinese offer at a very low cost and a Japanese offer, and do it over a 50-year evaluation in terms of life cycle, and because the operation and maintenance costs would be very low, there would be no disasters, and there would be no after-service cost. Whereas there are a vast number of power projects, Chinese power projects, all across India, which were put up at the lowest cost, but which are totally non-functional now. And there's no after-sales service today. And many of them, some of them coal, some of them gas-based, are just not working operational anymore. So I think that's another area where Indians must learn. And that is that in infrastructure project where the lifespan is, you're trying to build new cities for the next 100 years. You're looking at next 3 generations of people. If you go to St. Petersburg, one of the greatest things Russian did was to make those roads with Germans. Those roads have not required any repair even after 100 years. So when you work with good technology, when you work with the best companies, when you work with perfection, and when you're looking at the next 100 years, your perspective is very different. The Indian system has psychologically got into this. You can do L1 while buying a glass or buying a bottle or something. You can't do this for infrastructure which you're creating for the next 100 years. It's important that we change our processes of evaluation, learning from them. That's one. But irrespective of that, it's important that even on life cycle cost of technology, the Japanese need to be competitive. They need to be competitive with the rest of the world. You can't keep making Japan a very, very expensive economy. You can do this because it's a small area, but if you want Japanese companies to penetrate global markets, then they need to be competitive. So it cuts both ways. But life cycle cost of technology is important. I think that's important. The second question related to 1 year more, and I made that point that Japanese are risk averse, but they're very bureaucratic. They're far more bureaucratic than Indians are. And their systems of approval in Japan are very complex. You send a JBIC proposal, you send a JICA proposal. It takes a long time. To all my Japanese friends, I keep telling them, as the well-wisher, as their friend, that they need to beat Indians in the art of bureaucracy at least. So, they need to be much more quicker and faster, and that's important for them. Thirdly, in areas of defense, we need cooperation with Japan in some of these areas. And, defense, they have this amphibian plane which is outstanding. It's very expensive. But we should really look at areas where Japan can do manufacturing in India. We need to open up our defense for make in India. One of the main reasons I've always believed why manufacturing in India hasn't grown very substantially is because we've not opened up our defense to manufacturing. A lot of our defense, other than the Indian Navy, and Indian Navy is a great example of make in India, but Army and Air Force are cases where we just keep importing. So you need to make a paradigm shift towards manufacturing in India. So whatever orders you want. And second problem with defense is that we don't do aggregation of demand. Navy buys something, Air Force buys something, Army buys something, the Home Ministry, the CRPF, BSF buys something. So if you do aggregation of demand, you will get lots, a size and scale to do big manufacturing in India. So it's important. We do that. Japan can be a good partner as long as they are competitive. And the fourth is that we are developing the islands. It's the first time this government, the Prime Minister personally, has driven the development of islands in a very big way. We've taken all the approvals and we have gone ahead with the master planning of 10 islands in Andaman, and we are looking at another 10 islands which we'll develop. So about 20 islands across Andaman and Lakshadweep will be through master planning and opening up to private sector investments and creating the world's best infrastructure. Now, we are doing it very late in the day. I mean, if you go to several other places, the island has been a very major area of development. It's important that we do it with sustainability, we do it with carrying capacity, and we do it in a manner that these islands become unique treasures of India. And these are areas where we look forward to Japanese partnering us, collaborating with us. They have a huge interest in Andaman Island. They have an interest in Andaman Island, and we look forward to very closely collaborating with them in the development of these islands.
Is it okay if I take one more question?
Yeah, sure.
One more question, please. Okay. Okay, we'll have two more. Please go ahead. Just a minute, please.
Retired from the Navy. Slightly different from infrastructure. The two-way trade, commodity trade between India and Japan is less than $15 billion. It is less than 2% of our trade. So commodity trade between countries bring them together. Even if there are some divergent areas, we put them aside and concentrate on trade. So what could be the reason why the trade is not increasing between India and Japan? Is it quality issues or any other, like you mentioned about the bureaucratic angle? What could be the reason?
Yes, please.
Hello. My name is K.C. Johari. Well, I've admired the Japanese, where I went just shortly before my retirement in 1984 to Japan as a leader of the Indian delegation. You mentioned, the speaker mentioned very cautiously the question of sustainability. Well, I recall a very interesting anecdote. When Suzuki came here and it was finalized, he told the Prime Minister, Madam, enthusiastically, translated into the English, that we should produce a family car for 10,000 rupees. Then I interjected in Hindi again, please tell that in India, family car means mother-in-law, father-in-law, and all kinds of things. So the Maruti, for which I was one of the first applicants, my old colleague, Khattar, not Khattar before him, Kaddu, Bhargava, he was the managing director. And Maruti is of course very, very successful, but the rate of sustainability and the cost and all, would you like to comment on this question of the cost and the sustainability of this momentum of the family car?
Yeah. So let me first turn to the second question first, and that is that we, on the vehicle side, we are in the midst of a very major disruption which is going to take place. And this disruption is going to, it will probably take another 7-8 years to play out, by which time the cost of an electric vehicle battery would have fallen from about $273 to about $73. And by about, I envisage that by about 2028, the cost of an electric vehicle will be less than the cost of a combustion vehicle car. And therefore, because India is a globalized country and you have many OEM, Maruti, Hyundai, Mercedes, Volkswagen, all manufacturing here, there will be a huge influence of the size and scale of what we do. We export right now about 25% of our cars, we don't sell only for the domestic market. A company like Renault, which in its 118 years history has never manufactured a car outside Europe. 4 years back it came, manufactured a car, and is exporting 40% of Renault quid abroad. But by So whatever we do in the family car business, we are a center for compact car manufacturing. We are the center for great automobile component parts. We export a lot. Many of our manufacturers actually manufacture auto components for Mercedes and BMW. So whatever we do, we have to do it to size and scale, number one, which is what Indians lack the ability sometimes to think size and scale. It is important to understand that whatever you get in the domestic market, whatever value you get in the domestic market, 10x of that you get in exports. And every single country of the world which has grown for long periods has done it on the back of exports, whether it was Japan, whether it was Korea, whether it was China. So whatever we do in the world of manufacturing, we must do it to global size and scale to ride that wave of disruption which will happen in India in electric vehicle cars. And we should use this opportunity to penetrate global markets, because battery manufacturing, charging stations, new car manufacturing will all happen in the next 5 to 6 years, whether we like it or not. This is inevitable, and this will happen. Japanese have an advantage. They've done a lot of work. They feel that there are different options. Toyota does, hybrid. You have Nissan, which in Yokohama does the self-charging, and actually Toyota's view is that electric vehicle is not the ultimate solution. The ultimate solution is hydrogen. So the amount of research which Japan is doing in this field is enormous, and therefore we need to work in very close partnership with Japan and Japanese companies and Japanese energy companies to ride that wave of disruption which will happen. On this trade point, I just wanted to say that Japanese are actually also very smart people. They believe in opening up other markets, but they don't allow their own markets to be opened. It's very difficult to, Japanese have made investments and penetrated markets all over the world. You try and doing that in Japan, impossible. Japan is the most closed economy of the world. I'm saying this as a great friend of Japan. Ask any Indian company to put up a manufacturing center in Japan, low cost, which will penetrate Japan. No. Japanese are very protective about Japanese companies. That's the sense of nationalism. They feel the sense of nationalism about promoting Japanese companies. And that's why they build Japanese companies, and that's why they've become many of these Japanese companies. If Japan doesn't allow them to move out of Japan and get into other countries, these companies will find it very difficult to have global excellence. And they should open up Japan both to manpower from abroad, allow Indian manpower to get into Japan, and they should allow Indian companies to get into Japan and face the heat of India and Japan.
On that note, thank you very much, Mr. Kant. I think we should give him a big hand.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I hope you found it interesting.
No, very good, very good. I'm one of the, you were bringing out this book.
Yeah.
So I have a piece there.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. I wanted to meet you, but I was abroad when you...
Come whenever you...
Hi, I'd like to call the next panel to order. If the panelists can please come up on stage for the last session for today. Thank you so much. Hi, I'd like everybody sitting towards the back, if they could please move towards the front, that would be appreciated. Just as part of the audience, if you could move to the front. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. If we may begin. First of all, I'd like to thank Carnegie India for inviting me to come and chair this panel. It's an important panel in view of the developments taking place in the Bay of Bengal region and which have been taking place for the last few years and the prospects ahead. And we have the topic is trans-border infrastructure and economic development in the Bay of Bengal region. And the overall theme is connectivity and connecting. We have a very distinguished panel here with Dr. Shubhashis Gangopadhyay, Research Director, India Development Foundation, Mr. Ken Kosomne, Minister, Economic and Development, Embassy of Japan in India, Dr. Mohammad Yunus, Senior Research Fellow of the Bangladesh Institute of Development Studies, and Mr. Zaw-Aung, Partner, First Rangoon Corporation Researcher, Myanmar Institute for Strategic and International Studies. I'll make a few brief remarks abusing the chair's prerogative, if I may. Why are we talking about connectivity or connecting the Bay of Bengal? For me, that's an inherent puzzle because this was a region which was integrally connected, where connectivity was maritime and non-maritime for millennia. And just a short history and the legacy of events about 75 years ago, we have become the least integrated region. So this is an anathema and a contradiction in terms. Number two, the eminent logic of the countries choosing to cooperate and collaborate with each other for economic development has been trumped by the irrationality of politics, which has kept all the countries hostage, deepened and broadened the divisions between them, and blurred the distinction between what is domestic and what is regional. However, having said that, I think there have been very positive and promising forward movements in some areas. I mean, a region which used to be integrally connected had no direct maritime shipping links. They had coastal shipping which was snapped. These have been restored through bilateral agreements between Bangladesh and India, India and Myanmar. To me, a logical extension would be for Sri Lanka joining in and Thailand joining in. The minute that happens, the Bay of Bengal is once again an integrated region. And this is where I think I will draw on this synergy that Dr. Kant spoke about in the earlier session. That is a huge potential for India and Japan now finding themselves in a confluence on strategic goals to come together and augment each other's capacities to develop the region. And while I say that there have been promising forward movements, history also has revealed that politics intervenes every time we see some forward movement taking place. And as I said, distinction between domestic and regional gets blurred. We are right now in a similar crisis situation, which could bring to a halt the process that had started a few years ago. And perhaps in this also, India and Japan can work together, because part of the history of the crisis that we are facing between Bangladesh and Myanmar is a legacy of history, with Japan and India having been on opposite sides of the fence 80 years ago. And so basically, if they are coming together today, I don't see why they cannot also help in resolving that legacy of history and putting that to rest, so that the rest of the region can start moving forward. The third point I'd like to make is, I think two points that Dr. Kant made are very, very important. Number one, Japan should be able to manufacture or produce the rolling stock, the parts required to give connectivity concrete shape by having it in India, because the cost of labor is cheap, it's more competitive, it will move forward fast, like many of the American and European companies have it. Number two, he mentioned about speed. And I'll just quote an anecdote, and I'll end here and then ask the panelists to take over. About 8 years ago, I had a discussion with Mr. Sridharan, who was in charge of the Delhi Metro, and I invited him he showed interest in developing the metro line in Dhaka. And India, he said that I can do 18 kilometers in 18 months. I don't need to do a survey or anything, because I've already been there, I have the plan, I'll just take it. But then, for whatever reasons, Japan was also a competitor. And it was given to JICA, and I told Sridharan that, well, not this one, the next one. He said, well, you'll be lucky if you get the pre-qualification and the pre-feasibility done in 5 years. It took just a little over 5 years since then. So that, I think, is very important because that's an opportunity missed as far as I'm concerned. It's a great opportunity that's been missed because otherwise the metro would have been completed, the dynamics of the politics would have changed totally. And I lay emphasis ad nauseum on politics trumping economics because we cannot ignore that. That is part of our lives, unfortunately. With having said that, may I request our distinguished panelists. I'll start with Dr. Gangopadhyay to my right. We have an hour and a half or maybe an hour and 20 minutes, so maybe 15 minutes to each.
I'll try and be even less than that because actually we're behind time. I'll keep it very short and I'm going to go slightly off script because of the discussion that has already taken place. There is no point repeating many of the points that were made, but it's better to take off from what has been said. So that's what I'm going to do. And in particular, I'm going to emphasize on something that I've observed in almost all regional cooperation and strategy conferences and workshops that I've gone to. If you recall, in the morning, there was standing room only. In the afternoon, when we were discussing the economic aspects of regional cooperation, there is enough room to put your feet up and relax. And I want to start with that because that indeed, I think, is a problem that this regional economic cooperation dialogues, at least in India, I notice that the economic part of the regional economic cooperation is never discussed, never focused on, and never made the real driving force. I want to make this point because, given what the Foreign Secretary said in the morning, that why do we have to think about the dragon in the room, right? And that is indeed the case. I don't think that if tomorrow China is no longer present as it is today, are we going to give up the discussion on regional cooperation? I don't think so. I hope not. So regardless of whether China is there or not, we need to discuss the regional economic cooperation simply because this entire region has similar problems and similar aspirations. Right? So it is only, we should think independently of what everything else is going on around us. Of course, if I want to build a secure road, right, then once the road is built and made secure, the objective ends and we go home and we relax. But if we make a road that encourages economic activity, I can assure you that we will ensure that it is secure. So unless we change the approach of looking at the economics of the region, I don't think this economic cooperation activity. And it is evident in what was being discussed in the morning too, that we have and many times we start all over again. So we have to prevent this from happening, and the only way we are going to do that is if we really look at regional economic cooperation, not just political strategy, because if political strategy drove economics, then I promise you apartheidism would be gone long ago. Right? It's the economics that drives the politics. So if we can get the economics right, I'm sure we are going to have political alliances in the region too, and we will have a stable Asia, and everything that we are trying to achieve through political dialogue alone. So that's the emphasis I think we should be putting back on the table. Now, the problem that has happened is that in India prior to 91, we were basically isolationists. We were not into trade. We always had a very small trade presence or global presence. And post 91, we have completely, given up the space to the private sector to carry on with the economics while the government handles the politics. If we really want regional economic cooperation, the government has to take an active part in generating the economic linkages. Yes, the private sector will implement it, of course, but the government has to act as a facilitator to generate that economic exchange among the private sector people. Somehow India stays away from doing that. We do not allow lobbying, at least openly. We do allow lobbying, but always not openly. So and the government thinks that it's best to stay away from economic decision making. We have reformed the economy. We have moved to a market economy. You go ahead and do things. But the government has to play a huge role in trade facilitation. Many of the things were discussed today in the morning too. You know, whenever we talk of politics and economics, we talk of free trade. Free trade agreements are not the only things that you can do when you do talk of regional cooperation, right? In fact, in the morning it was mentioned, why can't, you know, a ship coming into one port in one of these countries, right, take the goods straight through to some other country far away, connected by road, of course. So if you can get the road connectivity, you can get the customs officers to, you know, have a single window clearance for this entire region. And these are not, you know, pies in the sky, right? The ASEAN countries are already experimenting with this. And indeed, in India, as far as northeast movement of goods was concerned, it was piloted here too, because remember, the Indian states had different taxes. It was as if they were different countries with different import tariffs, right? But, you know, we had had a digital solution to that. So these are on the table, but we never bring them up when we discuss regional economic cooperation. And that is where the focus needs to be. Because if we have regional economic cooperation, the political alliance would be more sustainable. Otherwise, the moment the thread goes away, the thread that is bringing us together, the moment it goes away, the political alliance will go. So we must get our thing back, to the focus back on the economics. Now, there has been a lot of talk of the ODA, that India is Japan's largest ODA receiver or recipient. But the important thing that you see is that even though Mr. Kant talked about the growth in Japanese private investment, it is still very low compared to what Japan does elsewhere. Right? It's still quite low in India. And remember, India is a large country, right? So we should not compare ourselves to smaller economies. And most importantly, we have a huge labor force knocking on our doors, right, trying to get into the labor market. So clearly, Japan's presence here must be a lot more. But one thing I would like to point out is that if you look at Japan, and not just Japan, the ODA experience in any other part of the world, the private sector investment has only come in after the ODA has been worked out. Because once the infrastructure is set up, which is what much of the ODA does, once the infrastructure is set up, it acts as a facilitator for private investment. So I don't think we should get too worried about the Japanese investment still being low, because there is a lot of investment to be done in infrastructure, right, which will come up. And some of the pointers that Mr. Kant therefore gave are important to understand when the investment will pick up. The other thing I want to say about the private sector is that this romance that we have with PPP in infrastructure, we should give up. When we are talking about regional economic cooperation, we are really talking about some very basic infrastructure. And I cannot imagine how the private sector is going to participate in basic infrastructure. That has to be a very, very active government involvement to get the basic infrastructure working. And this is where Japan comes in. Japan is willing to give assistance to India and in the region to develop the infrastructure that connects us. So I will say the private sector needs to be facilitated, the private sector needs to step up to the plate, but we have to wait a little bit for them to start becoming active. In other words, FDI follows infrastructure investment. It doesn't lead, and neither does it do investment. You know, India always compares itself with China, right? And we always talk about, look at China, look, this is happening in China. We never say, look at the infrastructure in China, which is really phenomenal and has had seen phenomenal transformation. It was all done by government. It was not done by PPP. So we should look at the right examples, not the wrong ones. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gangopadhyay. I'll move on next to Mr. Kenko Sone. Kenko-san.
Yes. Good afternoon. Well, today's topic is the connectivity in the Bay of Bengal. But I just would like to start, even this Bay of Bengal. It is a region, but region August, when our Prime Minister Abe visited Kenya in Africa, he announced the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy. You know, Asia is, of course, the growth center of the world, and Africa is a huge potential with a lot of natural resources. So our idea is to connect this Asia and Africa through the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. That will bring the stability and the prosperity of the region, or the broader region as a whole. And in part of that, this Bay of Bengal will be also stable and prosperous. And of course, in order to realize this connectivity, we have to go work on the enhancing the infrastructure, trade and investment, business environment, and the development and human resource development, and so on. So those areas Japan has been working on in the various countries. And with India, we also align our this free and open Indo-Pacific strategy with the Act East policy of India. And in last month, when our Prime Minister visited Gujarat, we have a very good summit meeting, and the two leaders issued a joint statement. And a part of the joint statement, two leaders pledged to reinforce their efforts to align Japan's free and open trade and free and open Indo-Pacific strategy and the India's Act East policy, including through the enhancing the maritime security cooperation, improving connectivity in which the Indo-Pacific region, strengthening cooperation with ASEAN, and promoting discussions between experts in two countries. And then also we have emphasized the importance of connectivity. In this joint the statement, we have the section called the working together for a better connected world. And these two leaders expressed their strong commitment to work together to enhance connectivity in India with other countries in the Indo-Pacific region, including Africa. And they welcome the deepening their connectivity dialogues, aiming at achieving the concrete progress, and decide to further accelerate such initiatives. So Japan and India has been discussing how to improve the connectivity together with Japan and India and this country in this region. And speaking of this increasing the connectivity, the two leaders also emphasized some sort of the basic principles to go working on. The two leaders underlines the importance of all countries ensuring the development and the use of the connectivity infrastructure in an open, transparent, and non-exclusive manner based on the international standards and responsible debt financing practices, while ensuring the respect for the environment and technical territorial integrity, the rule of law, and the environment. And then this is sort of the basic concept of the principle. We would like to enhance the infrastructure connectivities. And we also, the two leaders also reaffirmed the importance of quality infrastructure, which among others ensure the alignment with local economic and development strategy, safety, and resistance and the resilience, and the social and environmental impacts, and job creation, as well as capacity building for the local communities. So I think one of the part that I would like to explain is this: what is this quality infrastructure? Well, Japan has been promoting this quality infrastructure. In May 2015, we announced the strategy called the Partnership for the Quality Infrastructure, and we start providing the approximately $110 billion in Asia over the next 5 years by making full use of Japanese economic cooperation tools, including ODA, as well as by the collaboration with the strengthened Asian Development Bank. And also at the G7 summit in Japan in May 2016, we also have another new initiative called the Expanded Partnership for Quality Infrastructure. This plan is aiming for the financing approximately 200 billion US dollars over the next 5 years to infrastructure projects all over the world. And this initiative has enabled us to provide a larger amount of the risk monies to infrastructure projects all over the world, of course, including this region. And Japan will try to expedite the process of ODA approval processes as well. So what are this quality infrastructure? Well, there are several elements in quality infrastructure. First, it's the economic efficiency, not in short term, but more like the long life cycle costs. Second is resilience against natural disasters. Third is safety. Fourth, consideration on the environmental and social impact, and also the contribution to the local society and economy. So let me explain a little bit more details about each of those elements. First, about the quality infrastructure. First, about the cost. The quality infrastructure may appear costly. However, since it is easy to use, durable, environmentally friendly, and disaster resilient, so in the long term, the quality infrastructure need cost effective in the long run. As you already, Mr. Kant also mentioned about the Japanese high-speed railways, it is maybe it's the construction, it costs rather higher than the most of the high-speed railway system in other countries. But it is very safe, as there have been no operational fatal accidents since the beginning, and it is resilient to the natural disasters. As you can remember that during the Great East Japan earthquake, there was no serious damage for the Tohoku Shinkansen, even under that severe earthquakes. And the second one is the resilience. We have been establishing technology to build strong, resilient infrastructure against great disasters, because our country, Japan, often suffers a lot of natural disasters. And so we have been developing a lot of good technologies to resilient technologies to improve our infrastructures. So in this part, we can contribute to upgrading the level of disaster resilient infrastructure as well. And as for the environmental social impact, well, it's one of the prominent example is the Delhi Metro project. This is very familiar with the people in Delhi. And the Delhi Metro has reduced the heavy traffic of automobiles, and this can play an important role for mitigating the aftermath of the air pollutions. Still, we have been suffering, and I hope we have been also still continue working on the metro project, and that will further contributing the environment as well. And also this metro has it introduced the train carriage for the women. This is also contribute to the women's well-being as well. And in the field of the environment, Japan has since faced serious environmental problems in 1960s and 70s. So we have overcome these problems with the elaboration with the public and private sector for a long time. So I believe that Japan's experience and the quality infrastructure based on Japan's high technology on this environmental field will also contribute. It will be useful for resolving these environmental problems as well. So these are some of the elements that Japan is emphasizing when we providing our infrastructure project. And based on this concept of the quality infrastructure. We have several projects is going on in these regions. And for example, in Bangladesh, we have been working together with the Bangladesh government for working on the Bay of Bengal, the industrial growth belt called Big B project. We have been supporting the construction of the ultra supercritical coal power plants, working on the improvement of the roads, bridges, and railways, and also having some supporting some capacity building for the SEZ development. And also in Myanmar, we have been working on the project in Dawei and in the SEZ development. And also we have been working on the improvement of the road connecting with Dawei to the region in Myanmar. And Sri Lanka, we have been supporting the improvement of Colombo port since 1980s. And now we're also providing some grant assistance to support the development of Trincomalee port as well. Well, these are the more the maritime connectivities. But in this region, there is also inland connectivity, which is also a very important aspect. And this in the two leaders summit meeting in last month, we also agree to work more closely on the development of the northeast region in India. We established the group called Activist Forum. We would like to discuss the connectivity is this region and the providing several assistance. We have been providing some assistance for the road improvement, for the sewage project and the forestry project. Especially this road project, it will be eventually connecting with Bangladesh and Myanmar, and it will enhance the movement of the goods and the people through this region, and that will be another good aspect that Japan can contribute in this region as well. Well, it may be a very challenging task. We cannot change everything overnight, and maybe Japanese assistance takes longer time, but we are very cautious, and once we decided to work on, and once it's finished, it will always better than most of the cases. I assure that. And we have been experienced a good project, and it will be very much appreciated those countries. And then our ODA success in most of the East Asian countries will be one of the good examples. And we continue to work together with India to further developing this region of the Bay of Bengal as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sone, for your very valuable remarks. May I now request Dr. Mohammad Yunus? Please, sir, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. I first thank Carnegie India and IDF to invite me to this August gathering and to talk about often political and challenging task about the regional connectivity, what Bangladesh thinks and what Bangladesh is doing and or is planning to do for itself to be an important partner in this regional integration process. The reality is that Bangladesh is at a critical point that connects East Asia and Southeast Asia, or for that matter to connect the northeastern region of India to the rest of India. So it's Bangladesh's infrastructure initiatives and other related initiatives will have a strong bearing on the success or lack of these two types of connectivity. This the connectivity issue started long ago. As Ambassador Karim rightly mentioned, it is not connectivity, it is reconnecting, restoring the old connectivity, what we are striving for and struggling to achieve because of the lack of will sometimes among the political leadership, as Admiral mentioned, the trust, the confidence across partners in development. These are the realities, but one has to move on. So that's why it started when the two prime ministers, Bangladesh and Indian prime ministers, issued this joint communique bilaterally, but not ignoring the neighbors like Nepal and Bhutan in the joint communique back in 2009 or 10, I guess in 10. So what happened then, there were renewed interest and also the debate whether in our part within the country across political spectrum in Bangladesh, there was a fierce debate. Should we or should we not? Is it to the interest of Bangladesh, or it will only serve India's interest? So then, as a student in economics, we embarked on a difficult project, whether it would be beneficial for Bangladesh to give transit facility to India, Nepal and Bhutan. And we found that, yes, with the right kind of charges being imposed on different infrastructure damages services, it would be beneficial. So within that perspective then came in, because the SARC is almost at a moribund stage. I'm not blaming for whom or why, but the reality is that. So we look back, the ADB through this interest of this sub-region form this SASEC, South Asia Sub-Regional Economic Cooperation, and everything is moving towards east, looking east, acting east. So this is now the slogan. At this juncture, then came in this Chinese ABOR or RBI initiative, and coastal shipping, maritime Silk Route. So many things are coming. And Bangladesh has always been there, whether it likes it or not, because of the geographic location of the country. What it did, it negotiated bilaterally, sometimes initiated by us, sometimes by development partners or neighbors like India in their line of credit, India negotiation, or Japan in their development assistance in the Big B initiative, which I'll try to explain what it is. So for this, to build infrastructure, it is not only building infrastructure, it is only the first step. Now, for that you need to develop yourself, because to reap the benefit of giving transit, you need to grow, you need to have your own own investment, and for that you need energy. So within that perspective, then Japanese Prime Minister visited Bangladesh and proposed this big Bay of Bengal growth, industrial growth belt, and for which Japanese government promised to build LNG terminal in the southeast Bangladesh in Cox's Bazar, Maheshkali Island, and also coal hub, and also a deep sea port. Concurrently, Bangladesh also is building another deep sea port at the southwest part of Bangladesh at Paira deep sea port to cater to the greater needs. These two ports will serve, one will serve the southeast one along with Mongla will serve the interest of the mainland India, West Bengal, part of West Bengal and Nepal and Bhutan, and the one in the southeast, I believe when it is fully developed along with Chittagong, will cater to the greater and dying needs of the northeastern region of India. Along with, if you extend the logic then to link Myanmar, Situe, and so the maritime linking the coastal shipping will get an impetus once these ports are in operation. And in this initiative, in Growth and Belt, there are three major pillars: growth of trade and industry, infrastructure, and energy. For industrial development, Japanese proposed, in line with our Bangladesh Economic Zone Act, where we are planning to create around 100 special economic zones across the country, and few of them, 2-3 I believe, are located in the vicinity of that area. One is in Maheshkhali itself at the southern side of it, other in Cox's Bazar. So this Bangladesh government has agreed to give exclusive right to the Japanese investors to invest in those special economic zone. And along that also, at the northern side of the island, there would be LNG terminal, because energy crisis is looming large as we are growing, but the country is facing acute energy crisis in terms of electricity and fuel for our industrial growth. So what it will do, based on imported coal and it will generate electricity, and also it will give liquefied natural gas to the industrial sector, and that will then there will be growth spurt at the southern side of the corridor, which will ultimately connect through other agencies, especially by the Asian Development Bank, which is now helping us to improve a branch railway line between Chittagong and Dohajari, to extend it to full-fledged dual gauge line up to Cox's Bazar in the first phase, and ultimately to move beyond Cox's Bazar to Gundum, which would connect to Myanmar. So these are the plans. In that case, Bangladesh has a special economic zone, exclusive export processing zone, 8 of them at present, which are running, 2 are running at full capacity, others are there, but whatever foreign investment that comes to the country are to this export processing zone, and hopefully will come a few in the planned special economic zone. But these are footloose company, as Professor Shubhashis Gangopadhyay mentioned. These are for the private investment to make their own money. To make this public investment infrastructure development, the return is low, and there is no direct benefit that the investor get, hardly any. Even if for PPP takes time, the dream may become disillusioned as time goes by. So government has to step in infrastructure. For that, which we need to address. This also comes to connect ourselves. We will also derive benefit. It's not giving away to our neighbors. Then for that, we need financing. Where would this come from? This would come from some like a kind of a Big B initiative from Japan, sometimes from OBOR initiative from China, and a line of credit and grant from India. So through this process, Bangladesh will try to integrate, having a friendly relationship with all the key players in the region. Another thing, when we talk about, I also had one occasion when His Excellency Ambassador Finak Chakraborty was in Dhaka. We are having another debate in the country, the kind of opening we have made in giving transit to India. A section of us believe that the charges that has been negotiated between the two countries is too low. It's not sustainable in the long run, and Bangladesh will not be able, given these charges, if it collects from India giving road transit or rail transit, Bangladesh will not be able to give state-of-art services to India. So it is to India's interest to keep it sustainable, to get state-of-art services, to think it is not a private negotiation, it is not a beggar thy neighbor policy. I don't care what you do. If I can maximize my benefit, it is fine. It is a cooperation. India needs to avail, Bangladesh needs to give. So we have to think from a different perspective when negotiate these charges and rates, so that the other party will be able to give you the state of services that you demand, because otherwise it will not be sustainable. If it is not priced at a long-term marginal cost basis, then the party will not be able to cater to your needs and satisfaction. The other one is I've been listening to this India, China and India are development partners, and also China, India and Japan are development partners for quite long, and there have been also Japan is also a continuously important bilateral development partners to us. But one thing that bothers me is this, that has been echoed a few times in the morning session also. Whether we like or not, there is another important player. If India wants to materialize its look East policy into act its East policy, we are there because we already have a bilateral agreement, and we will have, if it comes to business, we will have multilateral agreement through BIMSTEC or BCIM. But given the current situation, as Ambassador Karim mentioned, prevailing, I am afraid it will be an integration within the sub-region which will serve the needs of SASEC, BBIN, to extend it to BCIM, going towards north, towards Kunming, or to extend it to BIMSTEC, going to the south towards Bangkok. We need Myanmar, and it takes three arms to make a triangle. If one of them is missing, it will not be a triangle, it will be an angle. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yunus. And last, but certainly not the least, may I request Mr. Zaw-Aung to please take the floor.
So before I start, like a disclaimer, like everything I said is like personal view, blah, 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 right? And so when Carnegie asked me to like come and give a talk about Myanmar, they said, oh, give a talk about Myanmar's approach to international linkages. And my question was like, is there really such an approach? Right, so my talk is mainly going to be about like how we got here and like where to go next from here. And so as far as how we got here, I mean, like, Myanmar is kind of opposite of India in the sense that we kind of like always have looked east, like instead of like looking west. I mean, we always looked like China to like Thailand to a certain extent to Singapore, and because of historical ties to Japan to a lesser extent. And until very recently, we don't even have a direct flight connection from Yangon to New Delhi. That was a new thing. And we still don't have connections, direct flight connections to like Dakar or Colombo. So it's not something that we have actually like looked at. The Bay of Bengal is not actually something we have looked at in detail until very recently. So, but what has changed, right? What's changed is that the country has started opening up in last 5 years, and with that comes some form of like diversification of trade. I mean, as you will know, Yangon, which is a river port, still handles like 80% of like all the import-export trade in Myanmar, and that has to be like diversified as the country grows. And in order for Myanmar to keep growing at 5 or 6% or like 7 or 8% continuously, we need like more and more infrastructure development, more and more special economic zones, and that's why the Bay of Bengal region become more and more important. So we have now like 2 smaller ports planned on the Bay of Bengal region, 3 special economic zones, a couple of deep sea ports in the making, and a couple of offshore supply bases. So I'll just walk through that in a sec. But firstly, just like a small review of how infrastructure development has taken place in Myanmar in like last decade or so. It's mostly very ad hoc. There will be a few private sector driven infrastructure projects where economics makes sense. And a couple others would be like a pet projects by like this minister or that minister. And then there would be like big projects that are driven by international partners like Thailand, Japan, China, India. So those are kind of like the existing paradigm, but with the new developments in past 5 years, the government has taken bigger initiative with like World Bank, IFC, ADB help. So things are moving like a bit on that front. So can somebody turn on the presentation? Sorry. So as far as we go forward, this is the 3 areas where I see the biggest challenges: the local linkages, the government ownership, and soft capacity constraints. So I'm going to be a little bit shorter on the government ownership and the soft capacity constraints, but they just mainly meant that the government has so many things on the table, and then like the JICA proposals, like the proposal from Korea, proposal from India, World Bank, ADB, what to choose. And there's the soft capacity constraint on the government's human resources, and because there's so many projects to choose from, things get slipped through the cracks and all that. So I kind of revisit it a little bit, but the biggest thing that I want to dwell on is the local linkages aspect of it. So these are the 3 big economic routes that are currently planned, right? The Asian Highway 1, which begins in like Bangkok, passes to Mandalay and into the Indian Northeast. That's the diagonal. The one in the middle, the one that goes through Yangon, Mandalay, and up to China, that already exists, and that's part of the China-led economic corridor that's happening. And then the third one on the left is the Sittwe-based Kaladan infrastructure project that is India is undertaking. And for that, at least, the port is done, but the internal linkages, there needs to be done. It can go up to Palawar in Chin State, but not 24 months a year, only during the dry season. So I think most of the roads in Myanmar are kind of like that, and that's the main problem, right? The country is divided into 330 different townships, and in like 60 or 70 of them, the bullock carts are still the primary mode of transportation for like 20% of the population. In the middle, there is 75% of the population who primarily uses motorbikes, and only 5% of the population in like 25 townships, mainly around Yangon, uses cars. So how do you connect this regionally? You need to connect them locally first before we can get like regional or even international connectivity for Burma. So why are we talking about this? This is interesting because the graph on the right the graph on the left, where I don't know why it's saying star ranges, but it's just a correlation between consumer price index and the percentage of the all-weather road. The main takeaway from that graph is just that the more all-weather roads you have, the lower the inflation is. Makes sense because otherwise, if you see on the right, the transport price just adds up to any import price of a good. So people have less disposable income to spend on things like health, education. If inflation is around 50% higher in least connected areas than in the most connected areas. If that had been labels on there, it would show that the two topmost ones are the ones closest to the India border, the Chin and the Rakhine state, and the current troubles in the Rakhine state also stems from this sort of economic disparity. I mean, that's kind of like you can see from this graph. And then the one on the lowest side, the lowest inflation, the highest connectivity are the one closest to the eastern side, the Mon state, which is closest to Thailand. So you can see like a gross disparity just in this one graph. This is a little bit more of information on that. The country needs 110,000 more kilometers in new roads, and to upgrade, you need to upgrade the half the existing roads. And then the last one, the average road roughness, which is like how bumpy the roads are, which is important for logistic purposes, is 4.8 to 7%, 7, and in comparison in like Japan or Thailand, it would be like 1 to 2. So that's how bad the condition is. But the problem is that the regional linkages are sexy. The government can stand up and say, oh, we're doing this. But this sort of thing is not very sexy. So nobody's really talking about it. Nobody's really doing anything about it. And I think we should start like changing the mindset a little bit on that front. So I'm very visual, so I'm just going to put up the things. So these three crosses, that's where the special economic zones are currently planned. And these three crosses, that's where the new potential deep sea ports are likely to be. The one on the west coast, the one near Yangon, and the one near Thailand. And then this is where the new offshore supply base are approved. That's a more private sector-led development project, mainly to supply the oil and gas fields that we have in the Bay of Bengal. And then the last is there's the airport PPP that the government is kind of testing. None of them are on the Bay of Bengal side, but there are two that kind of like relates to that. So these are like a lot of different projects, and then the government just doesn't really have a lot of capacity. So that's a lot of international help is needed on any of those projects in capacity areas, in human resources, and all of that. And in earlier morning section, we talk about the fiber optics and how important fiber optics laying across these highways are to connect the Bay of Bengal region. And there is a very interesting story about Myanmar related to that. When a private company was trying to lay a fiber optic line across the middle route a couple of years ago, it had to deal with 14 different government departments, and I think that's kind of indicative of this government ownership issues that I kind of mentioned at the very beginning. Nobody really owns a project. It's kind of divided between several different ministries, and left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing sometimes, and that needs to change. So I'm the last person keeping you guys from the home, so I'm just going to stop here and say that when you're thinking about Myanmar, when you're thinking about the regional connectivity, I think these are the three things that you probably have to think about: the human resources issues, the government ownership, and then the need for investment in local.
Thank you very much. And provocative. I recognize you, sir. So we'll take three questions, throw it to the panel, then go to another round. You, and then you. Well, two to begin with. Anyone? First, your question.
Thank you so much for your contribution to the dialogue today and very good presentation from the panelists at the end. My question was, China has been developing its OBOR or BRI through a very fine measure of institutionalized finance and economic statecraft. Any economic cooperation or economic connectivity that needs to happen in Bay of Bengal needs a similar dedication from either a bank or institutionalized financial institution. Do you think, and this is to all the panelists, that the Asian Development Bank or the World Bank will show the same dedication that China has provided through AIIB or the New Development Bank for its infrastructure projects in Southeast Asia and Central Asia?
The Minister of Economics from Japanese Embassy mentioned that though it is about Bay of Bengal, the vision is beyond Bay of Bengal also. So taking advantage of that statement, my question is about Arabian Sea area. Is Japan participating in the development of Chahabahar port? Because that is also something to do with the connectivity. So that port is going to connect hinterland of Afghanistan. Is Japan participating in that program?
If there are no other questions, I'll request the panelists.
There is one there.
Oh, the lady. We must not discriminate, please.
Thank you, all the panelists.
Yes,
My question is to a colleague from Bangladesh. Sir, it was a pleasure hearing your perspective on the Big B initiative, and I really wanted to ask about the connectivity issue that you raised, that the moment we talk about, I would try to use the word transit. So the moment you talk about that, it's very good that we have moved out of the word transit, the connectivity is there, but with your understanding, I think that still the concern that people had with the terminology transit, it still exists. But you said that the moment the cost-benefit analysis, the people are thinking that it will not be very viable for them. But sir, I think that the people, when they will be using, the Indian traders, when they will be using that road, they will also think about the tariff and the cost benefit. So when the segment in your country who are raising those issues, whether they are thinking it, because if you raise the cost really that high, whether it remains that attractive for the Indian traders to use that route, that is also a question which we need to address. So I think whether there has been some study or whether people are thinking on those lines or not, I just wanted to know. Thank you, sir.
Would you like to start first and then we'll go across?
Right. First, the question about the Chabahar port. Yes. Yes, we have been working on the development of Chabahar port. Recently, I think this year, we agreed to provide the X-ray equipment for the port. I think X-ray is not that small one. It's a big one for the cargoes, and we are now in the processing to it's just agreed, and we have been on the process of providing that equipment, and we have been also considered discussing further future development of this region as well. Yes, and for the first question, it's a big question. It's at this moment, of course, there is no fixed the fund or anything about this region. It could be some way to do that, but at this moment, we can work together with ADBs or World Bank and discussing what will be the necessity and what will be the priorities. And then we can, work together to collaborate or cooperate for providing infrastructure things. One way we have been already doing with the discussing with India, and I think in the future we have been have more collaboration cooperations. And in order to do that, I think the important thing is the countries in this region first have to discuss and what will be the right way to go ahead. Then we are always ready to work together in Japan.
Would you like to?
Yeah, I'll just take off from where he ended, right? Because indeed, and it in a sense ties up with the last issue that was raised. a country can build roads for its citizens, right? When it is building roads for connectivity with other nations, right, then clearly there is some thought process which says that it is worth, economically, commercially, worth doing it. They're certainly not doing it for their citizens. Right? Let us not fool ourselves on that. We are doing it for our own interests. Right? And therefore there is some thinking which says that this interest is beneficial to everybody. And once that is there, the financial instruments will come up. Will we have it in the same way as China? Of course not. Right? But we will develop our own financial instruments. Remember, Mr. Kant said that when they were looking at the bullet train, they looked at various options and then settled with the Japanese offer, right? Because they gave financing, they gave technology. So therefore, how this financial instrument will be developed and will be effective, that we will see. That's the whole idea of taking up these challenges. If we go in with a fixed formula, because China has done it this way, it is not going to succeed.
Yes, thank you. I didn't want to use the word transit because there were debates when this issue came up back at the beginning, right after the joint communique between Indian and Bangladesh Prime Ministers. There was one group which used to say, we don't want to give transit, we will give transshipment. Another says, don't say utter the word corridor, it's a taboo. So there are so many misgivings. I'm not an expert on this, but to me, connectivity is a physical concept, transshipment is a transport concept, transit is a trade-related concept, which if you look into the GATT Article 94, Article 5, then you see what it defines. If anything that originates beyond the country and also ends up beyond the country, it's a freight in transit. So this is it, your fundamental issue. Well, when you, because Bangladesh, or for that matter, when Myanmar does it, or Nepal does it, or India does it in the chicken neck for giving transit to Bhutan and Nepal, they will use their own money. So whether it is profitable for Bhutanese and Nepalese traders, it would be their business, but for Indian business would be to get at least the long-term marginal cost of this public sector investment. Otherwise, there will be love lost. So for Bangladesh, it is a repeated phenomena. It is a phenomena for a distant future, maybe for eternity. After you and me, the posterity will take this over and will continue. So for Bangladesh to get, or the minimum cost that has been invested in developing this infrastructure and will continue to do so. Same is true for India in the case of chicken neck. Same will be true for Myanmar if they are to give a transit towards north to Kunming through to the Chinese, or towards south to the Thais and others. They need to recover at least the long-term marginal cost. Otherwise, it would not be sustainable and there would be chaos. That's why I said it's not a private business. You just negotiate bilaterally and get a price. So both the parties, it's not only Bangladesh, India, both the parties need to think twice, look from a different perspective, that we need to get this on a sustainable basis, not on a one-time basis. Thank you.
Mr. Shin?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the AIIB, right? Because I think the trickiest part for a regional bank will be like sustaining political will down the line. A couple of years ago, we did talk a lot about like a BRICS bank, right? Now you don't hear about BRICS bank anymore as China shifted the focus to AIIB. So I mean, that sort of thing can happen. And even with AIIB, the worry is when President Xi inevitably steps down, what's going to happen? This is his project, right? So I mean, the great thing about ADB or World Bank is that they've been around for 60 years. I mean, we know where they stand on things. So I think Yeah.
Thank you.
My bet is going to be on them.
No, in fact, you see, right after this Bangladesh-India joint communique, because and when these issues were mooted across political leaders in the region, the AID floated the concept of developing infrastructure through the SASEC initiative. So AIDB has already been there and it will be there.
Thank you all very much. It's been a very rich discussion. I think a lot of nuances also came out. I will touch on 2 or 3 of these very briefly. Number one, I completely agree with you, Kenko-san, that we need to look not just at the Bay of Bengal, we need to look at the larger picture. But the larger picture for people here is a whole universe. And sometimes the entire gamut of the universe is incomprehensible. So, and you have already seen in the nuances and undercurrents that came out that there are problems within the country and problems between the countries and the regions, which is acting as a barrier. So first, I think we do need to focus on getting this core area working, because reality is that the Far East and the Far West are already better connected than the core middle area, which should be better connected but is not. Number one. Number two, I think what you mentioned about the state of the roads in Myanmar, it's not just Myanmar, it's the whole of Northeast and the whole of what is now Bengal, which have the same problems. These roads cannot be used 24/7, 365. They cannot be used maybe 24/7, 100. And that's a serious problem. If you're talking about movement of goods and services and everything else and you can't get across, so you have to think in terms of hubs and spokes, hubs being the maritime connectivity points, augmented perhaps by air with short takeoff and landing aircrafts augmenting it, and going back to the roads, because roads is something which is not man-made as such. It is the problem of the geomorphology of the region. You cannot fight against the region until we have learned how to master that. So we have to go with the flow of the region and see how we can take advantage of what is available and can be used, and then leverage that into the internal connectivities that we can do to the extent. Number three, I think Dr. Yunus brought out very clearly that despite the political decision taken in 2010 between the two prime ministers, and I think that is, in the history of the subcontinent in the last 70 years, the most critically important development that took place. Without Bangladesh and India getting the relations right, we could not even think of sub-regional cooperation going forward. I agree with you that we should be thinking about regional cooperation. We have been thinking. We have tried at it. SAARC was founded in 1985 December. Didn't go anywhere, and I don't see it going anywhere today. I mean, I might be hung and pilloried outside by some people, but that's the reality. So how do you do it? Try and get portions of SAARC that are willing to work together to kickstart the process, and maybe others will find in it some elements, some compelling examples of success, which will say, if they can do it, why can't I do it? And I think I see signs of that with Sri Lanka now expressing that we should join the coastal shipping. I think coastal shipping is good because, as you pointed out in a map, that is what actually connects all of us. Can we take advantage of that? And political scientists and economists will always argue with each other on the chicken and the egg debate. It will never end. I am more interested in where the politics and the economists intersect. That is where all the action happens, or it doesn't happen. If that doesn't happen, you do not cross the crossroads. So thank you all very much for your very rich contributions. I think we all have food for thought, Thank you very much, organizers, and a big round of applause for the conference.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador Karim. I'd like to bring Dr. Mohan on stage now to give the vote of thanks.
We have to keep seated.
Do we have to keep seated? We remain here?
Stay on the stage.
Okay, all right.
It's easier. No, it's my real pleasure to bring this workshop and conference to a close. So I really believe that the idea of the Bengal regionalism, the idea, I think the time has come to take that idea forward. We've seen very special conditions that have produced the new interest in Bay of Bengal, the resolution of the maritime territorial disputes. Ambassador Karim talked about the special effort that was made by India and Bangladesh to resolve some of the differences, the opening up of the economy of Myanmar. So a whole lot of factors, I think, have produced an outcome today that there is a historic moment here, that how do we take regionalism in Bay of Bengal forward. So I think we've heard many good ideas today, morning about security, cooperation, and in the afternoon about economic cooperation. These ideas are very, very valuable. And I think for us in Carnegie India, I think we had announced a Bay of Bengal initiative. The idea was to bring people from different perspectives to look at the prospects of Bay of Bengal regionalism. So we're especially privileged to have this partnership with India Development Foundation, whereas Shubhashis has often said today that politics alone is not going to make it. We need some economics, and I think our partnership where we are more focused on foreign policy and politics, while Shubhashis and his team bring in a special expertise in economic development. So we hope that to work this through and continue this effort in the coming years to develop this concept of regionalism. Part of the challenge is to keep track of what the governments are doing, and many times you feel the governments are ahead of the track. But I think there is a moment here whether we can push through some ideas. So I'm really grateful for the Foreign Secretary of India, Mr. Dr. Jaishankar, to show up this morning and to spend some time with us. I'm also express my thanks to the CEO of Niti Aayog, Mr. Amitabh Kant, to join us immediately after lunch. So I must say special thanks to all the speakers who come from from Myanmar, from Sri Lanka, and from Bangladesh. And some of them had really very special personal preoccupations, so it is really generous of them to come and spend time with us, because I think, again, there is a small community that is passionate about Bengal today, and we're really grateful for them. And I think and I hope that this community will continue to expand in the coming days. And thank you for all of you for joining us and spending this day with us. And I hope it's been enriching for you as well as it's been for us. Last but not least, the special thanks to the staff of India Development Foundation and Carnegie India, who have actually worked very hard in the last few weeks to pull this off. So please join me in thanking all the speakers. And I think we're adjourned now.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming in. My personal image will still be valid because I'm moving to Dhaka. I'll be stationed there. I'll be in touch with